Under the golden rays of a fading afternoon, Officer Mason drove through the quiet streets of a small neighborhood. His day had been just another routine one, checking in on familiar places, exchanging nods with residents, and ensuring the peace of the community. But something felt different that day, like a hint of something significant looming just around the corner. As he neared a small, well-kept playground, he noticed a solitary figure on one of the swings. A boy, maybe around 11 years old, lost in thought as he swung back and forth. Mason slowed his patrol car and took a moment to observe the scene, wondering why a child would be there alone so late. As dusk set in and the temperature began to drop, Mason felt a sense of unease. Following his instinct, he pulled over and approached the boy. "Hey there," he greeted softly, not wanting to startle him. The boy looked up, his eyes tired and wary, giving Mason a glimpse into the depth of emotions far beyond his years. The boy introduced himself as Jamie, and it didn't take long for Mason to realize that Jamie had been spending his nights in the playground for days. His mother was missing, and Jamie, too afraid to seek help, had turned the playground into his temporary home. In that moment, something in Mason shifted. A protective instinct, perhaps, or a pull toward this lonely child that he couldn't quite explain. Realizing Jamie had nowhere else to go, Mason gently guided him to his patrol car. They drove to the station in silence, the weight of the boy's situation pressing heavily on Mason. As they arrived, Mason made Jamie comfortable, promising to find his mother and give him a safe place to stay until then. But this wasn't just another case for Mason. It was deeply personal. He felt an overwhelming responsibility to help Jamie, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. The following days were filled with relentless searches and dead ends. Mason, driven by an unyielding need to help, went beyond his usual duties, contacting anyone who might have information about Jamie's mother, Maria. Finally, a breakthrough came, a hospital report of a woman in a coma, matching Maria's description. For Mason, it was as if he'd been hit with a jolt of both relief and dread, realizing the depth of Jamie's loss and the enormity of his responsibility toward this young boy. When Mason visited Maria in the hospital, he found himself face to face with memories of his own family, a family he'd lost long ago due to his all-consuming work. The sight of Maria, vulnerable and frail, tugged at old buried emotions. Jamie's innocent face, his silent hope, and his trust in Mason to reunite him with his mother sparked a transformation within Mason. This wasn't just an officer helping a child. It was Mason's chance to reconnect with a sense of purpose and compassion he'd long forgotten. And so, as Mason continued to look after Jamie, they began to form a bond that neither of them had expected. This journey, from officer and child to family and spirit, became a heartwarming tale of resilience, love, and the healing power of human connection, a story that would change both Mason and Jamie forever. The night Mason first brought Jamie to the station, the boy's exhaustion quickly overtook him. Wrapped in a warm blanket Mason had retrieved from the emergency supplies, Jamie fell asleep on a small cot. As Mason watched him, he couldn't shake the look of fear and uncertainty he had seen in Jamie's eyes. This wasn't just a lost child. It was a boy who had been forced to grow up too fast, holding on to a fragile hope that his mother would come back for him. As Jamie slept, Mason started his search for Maria. He called nearby hospitals, shelters, and even old colleagues who might have leads on missing persons cases. But each call seemed to lead to another dead end, and frustration began to build within him. His commitment to Jamie had quickly turned into a personal mission, and the idea of failing this young boy was a weight Mason wasn't prepared to bear. By morning, Jamie was up, his face filled with a quiet resolve that both impressed and saddened Mason. Over breakfast, Mason carefully explained that he would do everything in his power to find Jamie's mother. Jamie listened, nodding solemnly, his eyes reflecting a maturity far beyond his years. As they finished their meal, Jamie's voice broke the silence. "Do you think she's okay?" The vulnerability in Jamie's question shook Mason. He looked at the boy, considering his words carefully. I believe so, Mason replied, his voice steady. And I'm going to find her. I won't stop until we do. Over the next few days, Mason and Jamie fell into a quiet routine. Mason would spend hours on the phone and at his desk, piecing together any clues he could find. At night, he would check on Jamie, ensuring he was comfortable and safe. The boy, in turn, would sit by his side, sometimes silently watching as Mason worked, other times asking questions about Mason's life as a police officer. Their conversations, though simple, brought a warmth to Mason's life that he hadn't felt in years. Finally, a breakthrough came in the form of a tip from a hospital in a nearby town. A woman matching Maria's description had been admitted after an accident and was currently in a coma. Mason's heart raced as he scribbled down the details. He knew this could be the lead he and Jamie had been hoping for, but he was also wary. What if this wasn't her? And if it was, how would he tell Jamie that his mother was in such a critical condition? With Jamie in tow, Mason made the drive to the hospital. The ride was filled with anticipation, and Mason noticed the hope shining in Jamie's eyes. Arriving at the hospital, Mason felt a surge of both relief and anxiety. As they approached the room where the woman was, he turned to Jamie, kneeling to meet his gaze. "We're about to see someone who might be your mom," he explained gently. "But she's not well right now. Whatever happens, I'll be here for you." Jamie nodded, his small hands gripping Mason's tightly. Inside the hospital room, Mason felt a familiar ache as he looked at the woman in the bed. It was indeed Maria, though the vibrant woman Jamie described was replaced by a fragile figure hooked up to machines. Mason's heart sank as he considered how to help Jamie process this reality. Back at the station, Mason struggled with the gravity of the situation. Jamie was holding on to hope, and Mason couldn't bear the thought of letting him down. This case, which had started as just another duty, had become something profoundly personal. Mason found himself rethinking his life choices, feeling an urgency he hadn't felt in years, a need to be more than just a cop. He wanted to be there for Jamie, to be the protector and guide the boy so desperately needed. As Mason continued his search for resources and support, he began to see glimpses of his own lost humanity in the child's presence. Jamie, with his resilience and quiet strength, had awakened something within Mason. This mission was no longer just about reuniting a mother and son. It was about rediscovering family, compassion, and the simple power of being there for someone when they needed it most. With renewed determination, Mason sat down at his desk, ready to do everything he could to support Jamie and bring Maria back to him. Their journey together had only just begun, but Mason was ready for whatever lay ahead, knowing he would never let Jamie face it alone. Days turned into weeks, and the search for Maria became an everyday rhythm in Mason and Jamie's lives. Mason spent every spare moment digging into Maria's past, reaching out to old contacts, and gathering clues, determined to understand the full story behind Jamie's family. He was relentless, speaking with social workers, hospitals, and even checking databases in nearby cities, hoping to find some thread that might lead him closer to reuniting mother and son. Yet, every time Mason returned to Jamie with little progress, the boy's expression was a mixture of hope and quiet resignation. Jamie's resilience astounded Mason. Despite the bleak circumstances, the young boy rarely complained or lost his spirit. In fact, his small acts of kindness around the station, like bringing coffee to tired officers or tidying up, had earned him a soft spot in everyone's hearts. Jamie's warmth and gratitude seemed to breathe new life into Mason's world, a contrast to the routine professionalism that had defined his career until then. The two spent more and more time together, with Mason taking Jamie along on safe parts of his patrols, offering him glimpses into his world as an officer. Jamie listened eagerly to Mason's stories, his face lighting up whenever Mason shared tales of bravery or kindness. Their car rides became a sanctuary for both, a place where Jamie could escape his worries, if only for a little while, and Mason could find solace in the boy's companionship. One evening, as they returned to the station after a long day, Jamie looked up at Mason with a question that seemed to have been weighing on his mind for days. "Do you think I'll ever get to live with my mom again?" he asked, his voice small but steady. The question hit Mason harder than he expected, and for a moment, he struggled to find an answer that wouldn't shatter the boy's hopes. Taking a deep breath, Mason responded gently, "I don't know, Jamie, but I'm doing everything I can to make sure you two are together again. And until that day comes, I want you to know that you're not alone." He reached out, placing a comforting hand on Jamie's shoulder, and the boy managed a small smile, reassured by Mason's unwavering support. As days passed, the bond between them deepened, evolving from protector and ward to something much more significant. Mason began to see Jamie as more than just a child he was helping. He was family. The boy's presence filled a void Mason had long ignored, a quiet yearning for connection that his career had never satisfied. Jamie had brought warmth and purpose back into Mason's life, something he hadn't realized he'd lost. One rainy afternoon, Jamie sat beside Mason at his desk, scribbling drawings on a piece of paper while Mason sifted through reports. Without warning, Jamie held up a drawing, his face beaming with pride. In shaky but endearing lines, Jamie had drawn 3 figures: himself, his mother, and Mason. Above them, in bold letters, were the words, "My family." Mason's breath caught as he took in the image, a surge of emotion overwhelming him. The simplicity of Jamie's gesture, combined with the depth of its meaning, left him speechless. Overwhelmed, Mason realized just how deeply he had come to care for Jamie. This boy, who had once been a stranger, now felt like a son. In that moment, Mason made a silent promise. He would protect Jamie and ensure he had a safe, loving future, no matter what. Jamie deserved stability and happiness, and Mason was determined to be the rock Jamie could lean on through whatever challenges lay ahead. The following days saw the two settling into a comforting routine. Jamie spent most of his time at the station or at Mason's small, cozy apartment, where they'd share meals, laugh over simple jokes, and talk about their hopes for the future. Mason found himself cherishing these moments, grateful for the unexpected family life Jamie had brought into his world. For the first time in years, he felt truly connected to someone, a connection he was willing to fight for. As he tucked Jamie into bed one night, the boy looked up at him, his eyes wide with trust. "Thank you, Mason," he whispered, "for everything." Mason felt his heart swell with pride and love, emotions he hadn't let himself feel in so long. Leaning down, he ruffled Jamie's hair and replied softly, "You don't have to thank me, Jamie. You've given me just as much, if not more." This newfound bond gave Mason a renewed sense of purpose, strengthening his resolve to find Maria and reunite Jamie with his mother. His work was no longer just about following procedures or fulfilling duties. It was about honoring the promise he'd made to Jamie and giving this boy the life he deserved. As Mason lay in bed that night, he realized he had found something precious: family, and he was determined to do whatever it took to protect it. After weeks of searching, Mason finally received a phone call that reignited hope in his heart. It was the hospital, and they had news about Maria. Her condition had shown significant improvement. There were signs she might soon regain consciousness. Mason's heart raced as he processed the news. This was the moment he and Jamie had been waiting for, a chance for the family to be whole again. He knew that sharing this news with Jamie would be delicate. The boy's life had been a roller coaster of emotions, and Mason wanted to ensure he approached the moment with care. Returning to the station, Mason found Jamie drawing quietly in a corner, his face lighting up when he saw Mason. With a reassuring smile, Mason knelt beside him and said, "Jamie, I have some good news about your mom." Jamie's eyes widened, a mix of excitement and fear flashing across his face. Is she okay?" he asked, clutching his hands nervously. Mason placed a comforting hand on his shoulder, nodding. "She's getting better. The doctors believe she'll wake up soon, and when she does, You'll be able to see her." The relief in Jamie's face was palpable, and for a moment, he was speechless. Then, unable to contain his emotions, he threw his arms around Mason, holding on to him tightly. Mason hugged him back, feeling the weight of the boy's gratitude and love. "Thank you, Mason," Jamie whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You didn't give up on her." Over the following days, Mason prepared Jamie for the possibility of seeing his mother again. They talked about what it might be like, the emotions that could surface, and the patience they'd need as Maria recovered. Mason wanted to make sure Jamie understood that while this was a joyful development, there might still be challenges ahead. Then, one crisp morning, Mason received a call from the hospital. Maria was awake. Her memories were hazy, and she was weak, but the doctors felt it would be safe for Jamie to visit. Mason's heart raced as he relayed the news to Jamie, who was beside himself with anticipation and nervous energy. Together, they made their way to the hospital, Jamie clutching a small bouquet of wildflowers he'd picked from a nearby garden. At the hospital, Mason led Jamie through the quiet halls, finally stopping outside Maria's room. He knelt down, looking Jamie in the eyes. "Are you ready?" he asked gently. Jamie nodded, though his hands shook slightly as he clutched the flowers tightly. Taking a deep breath, Jamie entered the room with Mason at his side. Inside, Maria lay propped up in bed, her face pale, but her eyes full of recognition and love when she saw Jamie. "Mom!" Jamie cried, running to her side. Tears streamed down Maria's face as she embraced her son, holding him close as if afraid to let go. Mason watched the scene from a few steps away, his heart swelling with emotion. This reunion, this love between mother and son, was something he had fought so hard to make happen, and seeing it unfold before him was both fulfilling and humbling. After the initial flurry of emotions, Maria looked up at Mason, her gratitude unmistakable. "Thank you, Mason," she said, her voice filled with a depth of feeling that words alone couldn't express. Mason nodded, feeling a lump in his throat as he tried to respond. "You don't have to thank me," he managed, his voice soft. "Jamie is an incredible kid. He deserves to be with you." For the next few hours, Mason stayed by their side, helping Maria and Jamie reconnect and offering any support they needed. He watched as Maria and Jamie talked, laughed, and shed tears together, slowly beginning to rebuild their bond. Mason couldn't shake the warmth that filled his heart as he witnessed this precious reunion, and for the first time in years, he felt he had truly made a difference in someone's life. As the day went on, Mason realized that while he had reunited Maria and Jamie, his own journey wasn't over. The bond he shared with Jamie had become something irreplaceable, a connection that went beyond duty. Mason had come to love Jamie like his own, and the thought of stepping out of the boy's life felt both painful and wrong. Yet, he understood that he would need to find a way to balance his role in Jamie's life with the return of Maria. That evening, as they prepared to leave, Jamie turned to Mason, a look of worry crossing his face. "Will you still be around?" he asked softly, as if afraid of the answer. Mason knelt down, looking Jamie directly in the eyes. "Of course," he reassured him. "I'm not going anywhere. You and your mom are family to me now. I'll be here whenever you need me." Maria nodded, her own expression grateful. "We'd love to have you in our lives, Mason," she added gently. In that moment, Mason felt an overwhelming sense of belonging, of being part of something meaningful. He had gained more than just a sense of purpose. He had found a family, a bond forged through resilience, compassion, and love. As they left the hospital, Mason reflected on how this journey had transformed him. He was no longer the solitary officer who hid behind a stern exterior. Jamie and Maria had reminded him of the value of connection, of caring deeply and openly. This family, though brought together by difficult circumstances, had reignited the kindness and compassion within him that he had once thought lost. Months passed, and life slowly settled into a comforting rhythm for Mason, Maria, and Jamie. Maria had made remarkable progress in her recovery, with each day bringing her closer to full health. Her spirit was strong, fueled by the joy of being reunited with Jamie and the unwavering support of Mason. Together, they had formed a unique family, bonded not by blood, but by the challenges they had overcome and the love they had found in each other. After her release from the hospital, Maria faced the daunting task of rebuilding her life. With Jamie's help and Mason's constant encouragement, she found the strength to start over. Mason was by her side every step of the way, helping her find a stable place to live, secure a job, and ensure that Jamie's life was filled with as much normalcy and support as possible. The local community, touched by their story, pitched in to help as well. Neighbors offered everything from meals to clothing to small household items, a testament to the power of compassion and unity. The bond between Mason and Jamie grew even deeper as they spent more time together. Mason would often join them for dinners, help Jamie with his schoolwork, and even take him out for father-son activities on weekends. Jamie, in turn, had blossomed under Mason's guidance and love, finding confidence and joy that had once been hidden behind fear and uncertainty. For both Mason and Jamie, these moments were precious, a testament to the healing power of human connection. One evening, as they gathered around the dinner table, Jamie looked up at Mason and, with a shy smile, asked, "Would you stay with us, Mason? Like, for good?" His voice was filled with a vulnerability that tugged at Mason's heart, and he felt a familiar warmth spread through him. Maria watched, a gentle smile on her face, as Mason considered his response. Taking a deep breath, Mason looked at both Jamie and Maria, realizing just how much he wanted to be part of their lives permanently. "If you'll have me, I'd be honored to stay," he replied, his voice filled with emotion. Jamie's face lit up with joy, and Maria reached out, placing her hand over Mason's in silent affirmation. In the weeks that followed, Mason became a permanent fixture in Jamie and Maria's lives. He officially moved into a small house nearby, but he spent most of his time with them, helping to create a stable and loving home. They shared laughter, stories, and dreams of a future together. A future filled with hope and endless possibilities. Their bond, once fragile and tentative, had grown into something unbreakable. During the holiday season, the family decided to celebrate their first Christmas together. They spent days decorating the house, baking cookies, and filling their new home with warmth and joy. On Christmas Eve, Jamie presented Mason with a gift, a drawing he'd been working on for weeks. It depicted the three of them standing together, with the words, "My family," written in bold letters above their heads. Mason was overwhelmed, touched by the simplicity and depth of Jamie's gesture. This drawing, this family, had become his entire world. As the months turned into years, Mason continued to play a central role in Jamie's life, guiding him through both the challenges and joys of growing up. He became Jamie's mentor, protector, and father figure, embracing the role with pride and love. Maria, too, became his confidant and partner, someone he could share his dreams and worries with. Their journey, once marked by hardship and sorrow, had transformed into a story of resilience, love, and redemption. Mason often found himself reflecting on the day he'd first found Jamie in the playground, a lonely boy who had lost everything, and a solitary officer who had long forgotten the importance of family. That chance encounter had changed both their lives, bringing them together in ways neither could have imagined. Mason had gone from being a man who followed the rules and hid his emotions to a person who opened his heart to love, compassion, and connection. Jamie and Maria had given him a second chance, and he had embraced it with everything he had. As they gathered around the table one evening, sharing stories and laughter, Mason felt a profound sense of gratitude. He had found a family, not through blood or obligation, but through the simple yet powerful act of caring. He was no longer just Officer Mason. He was a father, a partner, and a friend. Together, they had built a life filled with love, and for Mason, that was the greatest gift of all. And so their journey continued. A testament to the idea that family is not always something we are born into, but something we create through kindness, resilience, and the willingness to open our hearts. For Mason, Maria, and Jamie, this was only the beginning of a beautiful new chapter. A life filled with love, laughter, and the knowledge that they would always be there for each other. No. Thank you for watching. If this story touched your heart, please consider sharing it with others so we can spread love and hope together. Don't forget to like, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Join us in inspiring more hearts with stories of kindness, resilience, and the power of family. Together, let's make the world a brighter place, one story at a time.